I'm Dr. Lynn Sandra Kahn, and I have a warning about episodes 17 through 22. You may be triggered by our conversations regarding the failures of family law, family court, foster care, medical kidnapping, and parental alienation. Please, if you have been caught up in the child welfare system, find your support group. You are not alone. The system is broken and abusive. Two places to start are the website rachelbruno.com, as we discuss in episode 17, and on Facebook, the page Family Forward Project with Connie Reguli, as we discuss in episode 19. Please find your support group. You are not alone. Viewer discretion advised. Welcome to my podcast, The Government Mechanic. I am your host, Dr. Lynn Sandra Kahn, and I am the Government Mechanic. For February of 2025, the theme for all 8 episodes will be the failures of the child welfare system in the United States. And that includes failures in foster care, family court, how decisions are made in hospitals about children when parents may or may not agree with treatment. There are many aspects to this problem related to family and child law in our country. My special guest today is Baily Templeton, who is a mother and advocate for family rights and reform of the child welfare system. Hi, Baily. How's Illinois?
Hello there. It's raining today, but we're struggling over here in Illinois policy-wise.
Well, your story is so powerful. I just want to give you the opportunity to tell us your story. So let's just start there.
Sure.
What happened to your family?
Well, in December of 2023, the last couple days of the year, we received some really heartbreaking information about a diagnosis for my son. The doctors were kind of concerned that he had bone cancer, and that sent us on the wildest ride that I could ever imagine going on with a cancer diagnosis. I immediately started doing as much research as possible, finding different treatments, different options, and different ways to try to help him cope with this diagnosis and to survive throughout the chemotherapy or whatever else that he would have to go through, because we all know that it's very deadly. It's very dangerous to be on these types of medications.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of research. About 25 days after my son was diagnosed with cancer, DCFS in Illinois, so that would be the Department of Family and Children's Services, basically the Child Protective Services of Illinois, they showed up at my home with concerns about what I was doing for my child and with concerns of medical neglect and that I was neglecting my child. That was not true. I knew that was not true. I just wanted to get a second opinion on his treatment. And I wanted to have a doctor that I could talk to with my ideas as well, being the parent, doing the research that I'd done. I wanted to talk with somebody about my ideas about how we could proceed with this treatment, something that's so scary, but I had well thought out about what I wanted to do with it. The hospitals didn't like that decision that I had made, and DCFS obtained a warrant after 7.5 hours outside of my house with no warrant to remove my child in the middle of the night from his home, from his family, and from everything that he knew, 25 days after a cancer diagnosis. This started a year that we will never forget, a year that has broken our family, but made us grow in ways that we could have never imagined, just because we found the strength within us to make it through this. To make a very long story short, due to legal issues right now, my son was kept in the hospital for 123 days straight, subjected to 14 rounds of chemotherapy. Then he had half of his leg amputated. The findings in that pathology report are not something I can discuss, but my need for a second opinion was very well deserved, especially after those surgery findings. And we were not allowed a second opinion because somebody who works for a state agency got to make the decisions on my son from the moment they took him.
So how does that work? So somebody at a state level was making medical decisions for your child?
Yes. So, after a child is removed from the home under suspicions of neglect, abuse, or what have you, there's a 72-hour period where you must be seen in front of a judge. And this is called an emergency hearing. And in that emergency hearing, for me, I was not allowed to have a lawyer. I asked for a lawyer if we could stop proceedings and so I could get a lawyer, and that was not allowed. They said I could have one for the next hearing. Mind you, if I would have had a lawyer at that first hearing, my son would have not been taken from me. He would have been returned immediately. But some flaws in the system happened that got my son placed in emergency temporary custody of Illinois DCFS. Once they have
The Child Services Agency in Illinois.
right, and once they have just that emergency custody, one signature from a judge, they can now make all medical decisions for that child.
The state makes the medical decisions.
Well, I would say the state, but I would more direct it at the Child Protective Services of Illinois is making that decision. Under the lieu of what they've told to the state is the issue, whether it's really an issue or not. So when you go into these type of proceedings, they give you all these allegations and they present them to a state's attorney, where the state's attorney then decides whether or not she wants to proceed with this case. So it's all based off of what this agency says without any actual Miranda rights. There's no actual investigation where they have to speak with these medical professionals because they don't have the right to speak with the medical professionals in this sense until they get that temporary custody. So after 3 days of your child being removed from you, you could have no say in any decision that happens to their life for the rest of their life when you're stuck in family court.
Wow.
And a lot of people
And you're not
aren't
allowed a
aware of
lawyer.
that. I was not allowed a lawyer. There are a lot of cases where you do get a lawyer, but I was not allowed to have a lawyer for that first hearing. And it took me till about 4 or 5 hearings in on this case to actually have a lawyer who is absolutely amazing and fought for my family like it was his family. And my family's back together now, by the grace of God. I don't know how else to explain it because there's so many other children who are stuck in this situation who haven't gotten out yet. And it's expensive. It's quite an uphill battle once you get involved with family court.
I'm so sorry this happened to you and your son. How is he doing now?
Oh, he's doing amazing. He's doing amazing. He's 100% in remission. There was findings, like I said, in pathology where I don't really have any concerns of this issue coming back. He plays like any normal child. He does have half a leg. He'll be getting his prosthetic soon. He's just set up his Make-A-Wish, and it's been really good. We had to go through a very hard year, but we came out on top, and now we're here to try to fix the system and what's happening. Now that we're safe,
Yeah.
I think we need to focus on the other kids who really need help.
Yep. Hundreds of thousands. I think 450,000 in foster care right now.
Right.
600,000 go in every year.
Yeah, and that
Give or
number
take.
stayed consistent in about the past 10 years. And that means either we're not doing a very good job as child protective services in keeping the families together, or maybe they have a quota they're trying to meet. Because it doesn't make sense for 600,000 children, American children, to be removed from their homes every year. Are American parents that awful that we can't find a way to keep the homes together? Or is there a lot of misunderstandings like there was in my case? 140 days after my son was taken from me, the judge ruled that the case was dismissed with prejudice. So they
What does
never
that
found
mean?
that I'd done anything wrong. And it also means that they can never bring this charge back to me. They can never bring it back up because the judge said it is absolutely bogus. There's nothing you can do. Return the child to the mother and don't bother her again, basically. But that's
And how long did it take before your child was returned?
140 days.
Oh. And after the judge ordered that?
Oh, he was already with me.
Was he? Okay.
So when he was placed in foster
140
care,
days. Pardon?
when he was placed in foster care, he was placed with my best friend. And so when he was home from chemotherapy for a couple weeks, I got to live with them as well. So I got to be with him from March 18th forward, but from January 23rd to March 18th, he spent every waking hour in the hospital and only got to see me 8 hours a week. And that's going through chemotherapy, going through body changes, losing his hair. He had to do all of that by himself because this agency said I did something wrong and drug it
With
on for
no
so
proof.
long. No proof. No proof. All I wanted was a second opinion, and I wanted a doctor who would talk to me openly about the other options, other things we could do to support his immune system through chemotherapy. I was never against taking care of my child. I was against not going in there blind. I want to know. I want to learn.
Yeah.
You have to explain it to
Yeah.
me before you do something to my child.
Right. And you should know what your options are. And they
Right.
should be happy to tell you what your options are.
So with
Oh
this
my gosh.
system, they have a guardian administrator. In almost every state, when I was doing research last night, I saw one for about every state. I didn't get through all 50, but this would be a person in position of power in child protective services who gets to sign the medical consents. So all children in one state get their medical consent signed by one person who works for the agency. They get to make
with
these
no
huge calls.
accountability.
I
Pardon?
don't see I don't see a lot of accountability in the decisions that are being made. Because if in my case I was found not guilty and my child was returned, they still made all of these decisions that informed consent should go to the parent. Informed
Yeah.
consent should not go to somebody who doesn't know nor cares about this child. They can say it on paperwork, but you don't know this child that you're making huge, huge decisions on. And
Yeah.
I had a lot of personal issues with the guardian administrator in my state, and I know other parents who are fighting the same issue are probably having a lot of issues with this person who signs consents. And with
Yeah.
that happening, if you look at the broader picture, that means that foster children are being used for medical research and testing. And that
Mm.
happens in lieu of, I'm thinking of those trials in Germany.
Nuremberg trials.
Yes, yes. So it violates Nuremberg for these
Mm.
children, but they get a signature of a judge or this one guardian administrator in each state signs off on
Wow.
medical testing and research on these children. A lot of times it's psychotropic drugs, a lot of times it's behavioral medication, but we have serious, I mean, that is serious, don't get me wrong, but we have serious calls being made, like removing body parts and deadly
Yeah.
medications being injected into these children without their consent. And there's been a lot of
Probably
things
not.
going on in politics about children being able to consent to certain things. Why isn't this discussion brought up about them consenting to their medical treatment? Why does one person get to violate Nuremberg over and over and over again? It doesn't make sense to me, and this agency needs to take a look at what's happening and kind of change some of their rules about the medical, at least the medical aspect of things.
Well, I think the issues are nationwide. And so I'm really curious about national policy. Do you have any thoughts about what policies in the entire system you think are the most important to change?
Well, I think number one would be restoring parental rights as what they
Mm.
are and keeping that upheld as what they are. And by that I mean parents should be able to decide on religious activities, they should be able to decide on medical treatments and schooling and education. I think those are three very fundamental things that parents should have the decision on. And that comes with a lot of backlash, but that's our job as parents. It's our job to make the right decisions for our children when they're not old enough or mature enough to make them on their own. And I think there's been a bill out right now talking about parental rights, but it's really important when you look at bills to see how they describe what a parent is. Because if that bill
Mm.
includes that a parent is a court appointed guardian, that goes directly back to that one person who signs those medical consents. So
Wow. Wow.
it's kind of tricky when you're looking at bills. There are some parental rights bills out right now, but the way they describe a parent does not work for actual flesh and blood parents. It also includes these
Wow.
state entities. So personally, we're
Oh,
working on an advocacy bill, which would be the first stop for a federal move. Would be this. Foster care uses about 40% of federal funds, so it is important that we get the federal level involved in this because it is our federal money paying for it. So
yeah.
we're trying to do an advocacy bill where you're allowed an advocate in the courtrooms, in the hospitals, and wherever else CPS may come and contact you, because you don't get Mirandized, you don't get told your rights, and you don't know how to face this
Yeah.
system unless you've been a part of it.
And
Even
you're
me,
also probably in shock. You're in
right,
shock because you don't, all this stuff is going on.
right, and I was a foster child. My mother was a foster child, so I'm pretty like learned with the system. But at the same point, my
Mm.
child had just been diagnosed with cancer, and I repeatedly told them, "These are my rights that you're violating. You can't do this," and they did not care. And I went out of my way. I
Wow.
called state representatives, I called federal representatives, and this was in the first couple months my son was taken from me. And what they could do was reach out to the Department of Children and Family Services and ask them questions, which doesn't help a parent in this situation because of the confidentiality clauses, Title 4E and Title 4B, that are put into the federal funding. That was made
That's
as a
really
way.
important. I think that's really important. I think
Yeah,
part of why people have no idea that foster care is a for profit industry, people have no idea what's going on when kids and families are pulled into these systems.
yeah,
And I think it's because of what you just said that you're not allowed to talk about it. There are
yeah,
non-disclosure agreements. You are forced to agree to confidentiality. You're not allowed, not only are you not allowed to have a lawyer in court, in family court, you're not allowed to say what you think.
right. Right, and my transcripts speak volumes, and someday I will be able to tell our entire story beginning to end and how warped this family law system is. But for now, I can just tell you the gist of the situation is there's money going into medically trafficking children around the United States, and that is our federal dollars that go towards that. If they're allowing foster children to be used for medical research and studying, there's also money involved in clinical trials. There's also money involved in doing out of the country clinical trials on these children who cannot stand up for themselves and tell them that they need to stop. Because even when they do, my son told them multiple times, they don't stop. They're going to do what they're paid to do, I suppose. There's no other way to look at it. It's all financial. And there's lots of charts and resources you can look up online and see where the claims I'm making are factual. The Department of
Oh,
Justice.
there's billions of dollars that
Yeah,
go to the states for this whole child welfare system. And
right.
I think 87% of the kids that end up in foster care are it's because of neglect, not
Yeah,
abuse. So
yes,
87% of the kids that are taken don't need to be taken. If the resources were there to help the family, invest in the family,
right,
invest in the unification of the family,
right.
and not taking kids away,
It's all
then
incentivized.
we pardon?
It's all become incentivized, unfortunately, to where the
Yes,
agencies
yes,
are only making money if they take the children.
in the state.
But I feel like a lot of us taxpayers would rather pay $400 for an air conditioning unit in a single mom's home than pay $3,000 a month for the rest of those kids' childhoods while they're sitting in a foster home or at an adopted family's home when the parent loved them but couldn't afford what they needed.
And that's how the agencies interpret neglect.
Right.
You know, is there enough food? Is it cool enough? Is it warm enough? Is there enough insulation? And instead of
Is she
helping
is
the
she
family
following
when
the
they find
doctor's
that
orders?
out, pardon?
Or is she following the doctor's demands?
Yeah.
And I really just wanted to go get the opinion from a doctor from Iowa, where I was born and raised. I really just wanted to go back to Iowa and talk to a doctor who might hear me out and discuss things with me, but it wasn't allowed. And that There's no neglect involved there, and with the case ending
No,
with
not at all.
dismissal, with dismissal, they went as far as to amputate my child's leg with somebody else's consent and then dismiss my case. And if they could do that to me, what could they do to anyone else? I'm a nobody. I'm just a mom. I'm just a homeschooling mom who loves her country and loves her children.
Hard to believe that this is the United States of America, really.
Right.
Um,
And you can try to FOIA request. Like, I tried really hard to get some information and facts to share with you guys about how many children are being medically trafficked through institutions or hospitals in the child protective services realm.
yeah.
But you cannot get a Freedom of Information Act FOIA request on these specific questions. So we can't even know how much of our money is going towards doing this to children, because Illinois residents need to realize they paid for this to happen to my child. That was
Yep.
their money that paid for this. If that's not something you stand for, then you stand up against it and say, I don't want to pay for that. We're not doing this anymore.
Well, kudos to your son for his courageous attempts to stand up for himself. I'm just so impressed by your courage and calm. You're. I'd be screaming. Well,
I knew
maybe I'd get past it, but it's so enraging and heartbreaking to hear your story and to know that it goes on over and over and over again.
I
And
knew that
there's,
if I showed how I felt, there would be no one to fight for him, because they would
yeah,
have put me in jail. They gag ordered me. I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody when I knew all this crazy stuff was happening and they were wrong. I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. It made everything so much worse for me every time I asked for help. And I would like to see that change. I would like
yeah.
innocent parents to be able to ask for help and receive it.
Or parents with kids in a hospital to be able to ask for another opinion
Yeah.
without being punished.
That's the American Code of Ethics. Like, that is our right. In the medical field, they have to allow it. And they're surpassing this stuff to get exactly what research they want from each child that they find researchable, I guess. I don't know how else. When you look at the bigger picture, it becomes so clear what's happening. But you have to have the information. You have to know that this stuff is happening to be able to talk about it.
And people just have no idea. I had no idea. I found out about all these issues when I was running for office in 2016 because I ended up at a excuse me, I ended up at a family preservation town hall forum in Iowa,
Okay.
which I didn't know what it would be, but it was like 15 stories of parents and grandparents whose kids have been taken by the state equivalent of Child Protective Services.
Right.
And there were horrible outcomes, horrible, horrible outcomes, including one death of a child. So people don't know. And even that, the parent of that child had to sign this confidentiality agreement in
Right.
family court. They were not
Right.
allowed to talk about it.
That's one
So
thing I'm very strict about, is as we proceed with our lawsuit, I will not sign an NDA. I
good.
think it's so important that the story comes out and that Drew has the freedom to talk about what happened to him in these hospitals. And one voice can start a ripple, and that's all we need. All we need, like going up to Washington, D.C. and talking to representatives, there is now a bill coming out of Texas. It's called HB 1652, the Childhood Cancer Act, which, if this passes, it means that parents get to decide and no CPS intervention. Like, in the bill,
Wow.
it says that no government entity can change the decision of the parent when it comes towards cancer. And I think that's something we should do federally. Because to think that a cancer parent would choose to watch their child suffer and die just blows my absolute mind. Because there is nobody in the world who is going to hurt more when that child passes, if that child passes, than the parents. There is no
Yep.
state entity, there is no judge, there is no lawyer who would hurt more than I would if something happened to my son. And that, I think that's a
Well,
general consensus all around for good parents.
yeah. Well, you are without a doubt a wonderful parent,
Thank
and
you.
I am so impressed with your courage and willingness to tell this really heartbreaking, horrible story. I'm so glad things are at a good place now. I'm glad you're following up with a lawsuit.
Yeah,
And I'm so grateful for you sharing your story with us. Thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I hope everyone heeds this warning and talks to their local representatives, their federal representatives, and tell them that this is happening and it's happening worldwide. All you have to do is look it up online. I know the world is just throwing so many things at you right now, but our children are our future. And if 600,000 of them every single year are being put into traumatizing situations, where are we at in 20 years when they are our future? We need to stop traumatizing our children and bring them home. And that's what I'm here for.
Beautifully said. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.